So I go knight e3 to stop g4. Magnus plays h3. And now here I make the critical mistake. I go rook to b2. What I should have done was I should have played g4 here. And the reason I should have done this is because after pawn to h4, I can just go knight to f5, and it's just an easy draw. I am so bad at chess. That is terrible. That is truly terrible. That is truly terrible. All right, so let's start with the games from yesterday. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. I played bishop to b5 here. First game of the day yesterday, Magnus again repeated his Berlin defense, like he did on the second day as well. So I play pawn to d3 here. He plays bishop c5. We trade. I go knight b to d2. I think I might have played this in the final game of, or no, I didn't play this in the final game of the previous day. But going into stop the stream, it's so boring. So boring, yeah. So I decided to play this knight b2 line. Magnus castled. I played knight to c4 here. When am I playing Fall Guys? I played Fall Guys. I might play a little bit later, perhaps. Anyway, knight c4, knight d7. I castle kingside. Of course, you cannot take the pawn here, because if you take the pawn after knight takes, queen d4, you will end up in a lot of trouble, because again, the bishop and the queen line up the battery, and secondarily, your knight is under attack. So your king is in bad shape, and your knight on e5 is in bad shape as well. There's a pretty classic but e5 is hanging. This is a pretty classic tactic that you will see in a lot of the Spanishes, the Ruy Lopez opening. So if you are a newer player, you should always be mindful. If you see a free pawn hanging, if you see something that's loose on e5, you should always be very, very careful to make sure that it's actually for free, and it's not that e5 is truly hanging as opposed to not hanging. Change the category. Okay, let me see. Am I in the right category? I think I'm in the right category. Yeah, I'm in chess. Okay. So, okay, you guys. All right. So, anyway. So, I castle my king. He goes f6 again. Now the pawn is under attack. So, let's say black plays a random move like a5. After knight takes, queen d4 does not create a threat because f2 is no longer under attack. And now I can just happily move my knight away and nothing is hanging. So, f6, I play pawn to a4, try to create some space on the queen side here. Magnus goes a5, and now I play bishop to e7. Wrong category, just switch to just chatting. Hilarious. Thank you, Gappa Cheese. Thank you for that. Okay, so bishop e3. So here Magnus plays b6 again, tries to consolidate the pawn chain. Also, he guards the bishop. Just a very pragmatic move here to defend. So now I go pawn to h4. And I will digress a little bit from the game. So one thing you're taught when you're very new to the game of chess is that you do not want to push pawns on the side of the board. Like specifically playing moves like h4, a4 generally are considered bad moves, especially if your king is castled. Now, one thing that I would say in general is that when you're trying to when we're trying to improve at the game, a lot of our focus these days is seeing what the computers are playing and what are the moves that make the most sense. And so in terms of computers, they very often will push pawns on the side of the board, specifically AlphaZero, the Google program. When you look at its games, there's so many moves that it goes h4, h5, pretty much even if the king is castled, even if the king is in the center, whatever it is. And so a lot of what the top players are trying to do these days is we're trying to emulate the computers and take these ideas and implement them in our own games. Now, the problem, of course, is that most of the time, the ideas behind these moves are not really easily understood because, as you know, computers do not speak English. They don't speak any language at all other than zeros and ones. So because you can't take computers and understand what they're thinking, there are many instances where it will just fling pawns. It'll just fling pawns up the board, and we try to, using our feeble human minds, understand why they do it, and then play it ourselves. But there are times like when I played h4, when he said 00010101, I felt that. Yeah, exactly. So in this game I played h4. Now, oddly enough, when you push the pawn on h4, because the rook is on f8 and not e8, like I played it. Let's say, for example, black goes rook e8. I think here. Okay, chat. See, look at this. Look at this top line. Okay, so this is why I hate computers and why I hate chess half the time. because now that you look at the evaluation, you see the computer says h4. It's the best move in the position. But in this game after b6, because I had not looked at this exact position. All right, let me change the depth as well. Let's change it to 20. Okay, let's see. Will it still say h4? h3? h4 is h4. h4. Harry the h pawn. Okay, now it's like saying rook e1, but you still see, okay, back on top. So this is what I'm saying in general terms, is that you see h4 and you're like, okay, h4. Computer says h4, play h4. But then in this case, h4 is actually a bad move, because here black can play queen e8, which Magnus found, which is a very nice move, by the way, because now it stops the pawn push and it covers these squares, so black can try to move this knight and bring the bishop to g4 here. So so this is very very nice move by Magnus. Now apparently computer says knight d2 or king h2 and white's okay. Again, king h2 is a very weird move for a human to play here, because what are you doing? I guess bishop e7. I don't know exactly what's happening. Probably I should have played this, takes knight e3. I cover the g4 square. Maybe at some point I can move a knight, play f4, play h5, but very hard to figure out. So Magnus found this queen e8 move, which was an excellent idea. I played pawn to g3 again. Figure, why not create a pawn chain? Maybe support f4, maybe just move the knight, but basically just try to play a move that has some logic to it. So here Magnus goes bishop e7, correctly keeping the bishop pair on the board. In long term, there could be issues on these light squares of g4 or h3. So now I go knight to e1. Kind of a sketchy move. I think the reason I played knight e1 was one thing that I wanted to do was knight h2 is also a move, but I figured if I go knight e1, I can try to get my long-term idea in of playing knight g2, h5, and knight to h4, and knight f5. So it's very clumsy and very slow, but the idea, I'm playing versus Magnus supercomputer and you're analyzing at depth 20. Well, you guys, the reason that I don't care about the depth and the reason that it doesn't matter is because I'm not going to play this position again, because this idea of playing pawn to h4 with the queen on d8 where it can go to e8 and stop h5 is a very strong reply, and it sort of nullifies this whole idea of h4 h5. It really neutralizes any of the attacking ideas, so I won't be playing this again. I can say that much right off. So that's why I don't mind going over this, because it's a pure concept that doesn't work. So I go knight e1 here, knight c5, knight g2. Again, idea to play h5, knight h4, knight f5 because the queen supports it, whereas before, if we go back here, what I would really like is to go h5, knight h4, but here black can take the pawn because the knight is in the way of the queen. So I go here, he goes bishop e6, I play pawn to b3 to support the knight on c4. Magnus goes queen d7. Again, a very nice move. I play queen e2. If I were to play h5 here, black can go bishop to g4, attacking the queen and attacking the pawn on h5, and now white is in quite a bit of trouble. So here I play queen to e2, rook e8. Now I go pawn to f3. The idea long term was kind of to go g4, clamp down on f5, and then maybe go h5, knight h4, knight f5 again. So here Magnus plays bishop takes knight. Very nice move. I take. Now actually I think this was a mistake, because when he took and played queen h3, I think Magnus originally missed that I could go king f2 and rook h1 here. Although after f5 apparently this is supposed to be very good for black. Rook h1, knight e4 takes with the discovery on the king g1 and queen g3, and black should be doing very well. My idea here was to go rook h2, and after rook f3 I go king h1, rook f8, and I go rook g1. The idea is to play knight e1, discover attack on the queen here on g3. Keeping all of what Magnus played aside, he said today during the broadcast that I'm playing the best chess and I'm making his life tough. It's a compliment. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've played very well. I played very well. This first game yesterday I didn't play well, and today I kind of got some bad positions, but overall I feel like I've been playing pretty good chess. So I'm very pleased with my play, but again, it's 2-2 and we still have a long way to go. All right, so f5 is maybe very good, very hard to play for a human. So Magnus goes queen e6, I go king g1, f5, and for the last time after takes queen f5, I again miss this queen h3 move, which I think was a sign that really Magnus was playing good chess. I wasn't really happy with my position, and I wasn't really sharp in this first game yesterday because I blundered with rook d1. What I should have played was king to h2, stopping queen h3, and then following it up with rook d1. And black is probably still a little bit better here, but it's not necessarily lost. I mean, maybe knight e6, computer says knight e6, rook d1, and something like bishop b4 is supposed to be good for black. I mean, I don't know. I think black is definitely better. I don't know how much better black is, but when I play rook d1, I blunder queen h3. After this move, it's completely lost. So bishop f2, bishop d6, and now the problem is basically black at some point is going to go e4. The pawn on g3 is going to hang, and then the whole king side kind of falls apart. So I play rook e1. I beat Magnus twice, so why not 3 times? One more match would not be enough, you guys. It's a best of 7, not a best of 5. What I would say, however, is while I do like the format, I think best of 7 is too long objectively. I think what they should have done for all these, maybe not all these events, but certainly for the final, is it should have been best of 3 and then best of 5 for the last one. I think best of 7 is a little bit too much, considering that the concept is to try and make it like tennis. I mean, the idea is to be like tennis, not to be like basketball or hockey. So it's a little bit odd, because I know the concept was based on tennis, so it's a little bit strange. Anyway, so I go rook e1, rook e7. I think best of 5 is what it should be. So rook f7. The commentators were extremely annoying, especially Peter. They talked too much about moves that happened decades ago and not enough focus on the actual game. Well, you guys, in terms of chess, a lot of the theory and the preparation is built upon our predecessors who came before us, and sort of they laid the groundwork for what we're playing. And yes, you guys, that's why I said it should be best of 5 like tennis, because of course, as we know, tennis is best of 3 or best of 5, not best of 7. But again, you guys, in terms of the commentary, you have to realize the focus is that what we're playing is based on decades of prep, decades of chess play, chess openings, and so that's why a lot of the stuff is regards to that. Okay, so f4, pawn takes, I take, queen g4. Now I go queen e2 again. Very bad position, very open king. So the best I can do here is try to trade off the queens. Magnus plays rook takes f4. Very nice move here, because I can't take the rook back because my king is pinned, or my knight is pinned to my king. So I trade. I go rook d4 again, trying to trade off pieces, trying to keep this position intact where I'm only down 1 pawn. So he goes rook g6. I play h5, rook h6. Now I go rook h4, and after rook f5, the position is kind of lost because black can just take. Decades of openings. Well, to be fair, the Rui Lopez openings, you guys, has been around since the 1560s, I believe it was, when the famous Spanish priest Rui Lopez de Seguara created the opening. So it's not even decades. We're talking about centuries. Sorry, not millennia, centuries. So centuries of chess. So that's why there's so much talk about this stuff. So I go bishop e3. I trade. I play bishop f4, trying somehow to bring the rook in and attack the base of the pawn chain here on c7. So Magnus trades, goes rook f5. I play here again, trying desperately to bring the rook in to attack all of these pawns. Goes c5. I go rook e7, h5. And the problem here is that after rook c7, king h7, black can guard the base with rook f6, and he has 2 connected passed pawns that just run down the board for free. So I go king g2, king h6, c3. Again, if I go check here, trying to pick up the pawn on b6, black goes rook f6, and I cannot trade because, again, black has 2 pawns, and this whole queen side is very stable. So I go pawn to c3, goes rook f6. I go rook c8, king g5, rook d8, king g4. I play pawn to b4, again, trying desperately just to open up this queen side, get some kind of pawn that has a free passage to the end of the board if possible. So here Magnus plays h4, completely ignoring it, and I resigned in view of the fact that basically I cannot create a passed pawn. Whichever pawn I capture, I don't get a pawn that can run up the board, and black is still just going to bring these 2 pawns down, use the rook and the king, and it's completely winning for black. So all right, let's move on to the next game. So second game of the day, and this again, Magnus was up 1-0. Magnus up 1-0 at this moment in time, and so in the second game he decided to return the favor. He played this Berlin defense, or I played the Berlin. He plays rook e1. Is this the first game analysis? We're looking at the third match yesterday. That was the first game of the third match yesterday. We're going to go through those games, and then I'll try to get through the games today as well. Knight e5, bishop e7, bishop f1, and again I was down 1-0 in this match, so I decided to play this knight f5 line. Knight takes e5 is also a line that I played quite a few times. Tuck Dells, I thank you for that comment. I would please chill out a little bit, dude. Please take a deep breath. So I play knight takes so I played knight f5 here, trying to keep more pieces on the board. He goes c3. I take d6, rook e1, d5, d4 castles, bishop f4, bishop d6, queen f3, and now we just make a repetition here. Again, I had black pieces in this game, and after losing the first game, you kind of want to stabilize it a little bit and just you know, stabilize what's going on and keep it simple. So the second game was a draw, very routine. Again, Magnus decided to make the draw with white. I think he was feeling very confident at this moment because he had maybe 5 games with the black pieces in the Berlin up to this point, and he had never really been in trouble. So let's go to the third game. So I play e4. He goes e5. I play knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Magnus plays the Berlin, repeating what I played. Once again, what I would say also is there are 2 ways of looking at this opening. You can look at the Berlin as being either the greatest thing ever, or you can look at it as Vladimir Kramnik intentionally ruining the game of chess. Those are really the 2 attitudes you can have about this opening, because his Berlin defense, it was popular for a brief period in I want to say the 1960s or 1970s, and then it kind of fell out of fashion. But it came back in the 2001 World Championship match between Garry Kasparov and Vladimir Kramnik. So in that match, Kramnik played the Berlin every single time against Kasparov, and Kasparov basically decided to he hit his head against the wall. Maybe like I want to say 6 or 7 games. Maybe it was a little bit less. Maybe it was like 5 games in a row where he tried to play into this Berlin endgame with castles, knight e4, d4. Knight d6 takes d e5, knight f5, and they had maybe 4 or 5 games in the World Championship match, and Kasparov could never break through. And to give you guys some other lore about this endgame, so to show you guys an idea of how psychotic and how insane Garry Kimovich Kasparov, the former world champion, is, there in 2011 I was studying with Garry, as I think quite a few people know, and I saw his database. And Kasparov's database with this position after knight to f5 had, in ChessBase, by the way, because that's the software everyone uses, Garry Kasparov's database had, I believe, approximately 221 files on this Berlin. So Kasparov's vaunted database that I know everyone has talked about, Garry Kimovich Kasparov, had maybe 221 files on this stupid endgame, which shows you exactly just how into his head Kramnik got during that match, because Kasparov kept trying to tear down the wall and kept failing, and that's basically what cost Kasparov his world championship crown. So basically during that match, he literally kept every single day he was hitting his head on the wall trying to bust this endgame, and he couldn't do it. And even now, 20 years later nearly, the Berlin remains a very popular opening that's still played at the highest levels. But those are old files, yes. But the thing is, when I talk about the files, a lot of those files were created in 2001 during that match. So it just shows you just how brutal it was. Why didn't Kasparov switch to 1d4 LMAO? Could have still been world champion. Well, you guys, I think in terms of Kasparov losing that match, there are a couple things in play that I will talk about. The first thing that I would say is that Kasparov had a very big ego. He believed in his opening preparation. I would say up until that match, he was considered one of the leading authorities, if not the authority, on openings with white and black. So because he was such a big expert in the Berlin, in the Scotch, and all of these different openings, he refused to believe that Kramnik could outprepare him, or that this line that he thought was inferior was not bustable. So that, I think, is a large part of why Kasparov did it. Arrogance is suboptimal. That's why robots are so good. Yeah, I know, but that's why we're human at the end of the day. But certainly with Kasparov, I think it's like he thought in his mind, this opening is like, it's dubious. It cannot be a good opening. And so he's like, I refuse to accept that this is okay. So he kept trying game after game after game to tear down the Berlin Wall in the end game, and he kept failing. And then by the time that he wanted to switch, it was way too late. He had already lost two really rough games with the black pieces, and he only had 2 chances, I think, where he played d4 at the end of the match, and he wasn't able to win any of the games, unfortunately. So yeah, that's the Berlin defense for you. Aren't all chess players stubborn? Yeah, but the difference is that nowadays, I think because of computers, we're much more realistic. Like we know when computers tell us something is good. Gary admitted himself that his ego was the reason he went for the Berlin and lost. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, Kasparov, I think in 2001 was still probably a better player than Vladimir Kramnik, but he refused to accept that this opening was playable. He couldn't believe that it was that even though it looked dubious, that it was solid and sound. Mr. Kasparov tear down this wall exactly. So that was what cost him a title. He kept going into it and it didn't work. So it's still, even now, nearly 20 years later, one of the premier defenses with black in e4, e5. So bishop c5, I trade, I go knight d2 castles. And here, instead of castling or playing knight to c4, I decide to go queen to e2. He goes rook e8, I play knight to c4. Again, same idea, hit the pawn. E5 is hanging here because, again, let's say black plays an empty move. After knight takes e5, rook e5, knight e5, queen d4, my queen guards the pawn, so I can just move my knight out of the way. So here knight d7 is played by Magnus, guarding the pawn on e5. So I go h4 here, and now h4 makes a little bit more sense again because I'm going to get to play h5. Secondarily, my king is probably going to the queen side, not to the king side here. h4 again, you guys, like, at the end of the day, we're Alpha Zero, there is no discussion. Alpha Zero and Leela are the best chess players on this planet and in this galaxy, as far as we know. So because of that, when computers say play h4, we listen to computers and we try to play like computers. So a5 is played here. And by the way, you guys, to give you another example, h4 in the old days would have been considered a bad move. If Mikhail Botvinnik, for example, one of the founders of the Russian School of Chess, saw a move like h4, he would say, "This is such an ugly move because if long term you're giving up the square on g4, and black can probably put the bishop here, and you create this big hole on the square." So in the old days, I'm sure that moves like h4 would have been thought of as like premature, dubious, and not very good. So here he plays Magnus goes pawn to a5. I play h5. Botvinnik has a suspiciously American accent, yes. So h5 and now b5, knight e3, of course, knight f8, bishop 2, knight e6. And now one thing that I will add here is the pawn on e5 is not hanging, because after knight takes pawn, black is knight d4, creating the fossil. He attacks the queen, but he also attacks the knight at the same time. And the difference between this game and the game you'll see in the blitz is that in this position I have a pawn on h5, so there's no square for the queen to protect the knight and create the right triangle. So here I go a4, again trying to ask Magnus what he's doing, because I can still castle my king to the king side as well potentially, or go long depending on where he pushes his pawn. So right now I'm threatening to trade and take on a5 with the rook. So he goes b4, I play pawn to b3, again closing down this queen side. Now I can maybe castle because there are never going to be any open files and my king will be very safe here. So now he goes bishop to a6, again trying to line up some threats on this diagonal towards the queen on e2. So I go g3, again logical move, try to cut the squares where the knight can jump. Was b4 a mistake objectively? I don't think it was best. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know if a mistake is the right word, but it definitely was not the best move in the position. So bishop e3, I play bishop takes bishop, of course, try to activate my bishop to a better square. And now I will probably castle my king to the queen side at some point. So he goes f5 here, I play rook to h4. Again, Magnus tries to be very active because if I take this pawn at f5, black can go knight to d4, and it's really bad news for white, because if I take with the bishop after pawn takes knight e5, queen d5, I'm going to lose material here. Everything is kind of under attack. And if I take with the knight after pawn takes, I'm still going to lose the bishop on e3 or the queen on e2. And then if I move my queen to d1, I think black, and there are many good moves, but I think queen d5 is good. Maybe knight f5 is actually just simple, because again black's going to play e4. My king is stuck in the center. This rook is not coming into the game anytime soon, and bad stuff is happening. So here I play rook h4. Now I can laterally defend the pawn. I can catch with the rook, and I still can castle my king, so it's not that big of a deal that I move the rook to h4. So now he plays f4, I go bishop d2, knight d4, we trade. Again, I can't take this free pawn, because if I take, black has this move, and it creates this double attack on the knight, which is defending the rook. And so if I take the knight, he takes the rook. And if I move my queen, for example, after takes, he just takes the rook, and it's a free rook, and black is up one rook here. Do I think Magnus missed rook h4? I don't think so, but I think by this point he was already very low on time, and he was just trying to find just logical moves that sort of follow a plan. So now he goes f4, I play bishop d2, knight d4, we trade, and I go rook to c1. Again, I can't castle my king out of the center, because if I do this, I get checkmated. He brings the queen down to a1. So I go rook c1, so Magnus takes on g3, and apparently this is supposed to be very good for white, because what I can play is this amazing move, rook to g4, forcing black to capture. And in this situation, there are a lot of threats towards the black king, and black would have to trade the queens, and after trade we reach a better version of what occurs in the game. Because in the game, after pawn takes pawn, Magnus blunders with queen g1, whereas he could have actually played just rook f8 here. And you'll notice that what is that banging? I don't know what you're talking about. I can't castle my king anywhere, and black controls this f file. So Magnus misses big opportunity to play rook f8, and so here he plays queen g1, and after queen f1 takes queen f2. Yeah, actually, what it is, you guys, it's a double click. There's still a touch of lag. That's what it is. There's still a touch of lag. So queen f2, king f2, rook e6 is played here. So I go rook to g1. Rook f8, I go king to e1, and black is up one pawn here. So because black is up one pawn, it looks, you would think black is doing well. The problem for black is that I have the flying V formation here. The pawns are supporting each other. Everything supports, and so because everything is supporting here, what happens is that black would need to attack the base of the pawn chain, this pawn on c2, in order to create threats, which of course is not possible. You can't, I mean, you need 1, 2, 3 moves to get around. You can't get a rook to c5, so really the pawns are actually extremely good for white here, and black's pawns are very, very weak. There are 4 pawns on these dark squares that are all going to come under fire from the bishop on d2. So here he plays bishop c8, I go h6, Magnus goes g6, and now I go bishop g5. Very important move, because the point is that now I cut the idea of black double stacking the rooks on the f file. Black would really like to bring these rooks and use them powerfully down this f file. So I go bishop g5. This was from yesterday, was it not? Yeah, I'm going over the games from yesterday and today, because yesterday we had the sub battle, so I didn't have a chance to go over the games. So rook e8, I go rook to h2 here, rook to f3, rook f2 again, trying to trade off pieces here. So we trade rook f8, I go king to e3, and this is still very, very dangerous, because again, there are 3 big weaknesses, and white has no weakness. The bishop controls this one, and then again, these pawns are just ginormous here on the queen side. So everything for white is very secure. Black is under a lot of trouble here. This might even already be lost for black objectively, if I had to guess, although I mean, the computer maybe finds some lines. So he goes king f7, I go rook f1 check, he goes king e8, I trade, and this was a critical blunder. Now I don't know if Magnus missed bishop d8 or what exactly happened here, because when he goes king f7, rook f1, and we trade, I go bishop d8, black is going to lose a lot of juice here. He's going to lose at least 2, if not more, of his pawns. So he goes c5, I take, he goes here. And one thing that I would add, you guys, is I think also Magnus might have miscalculated this line with king f7, bishop c7, king e6. There's an all-star move here that I play pawn to d4. XQC Twitter got hacked. I hope he didn't message me. I hope he didn't. Anyway, okay. But the point is that here, if I were to take this pawn after c5, white is maybe winning here, but it's going to be very technically difficult. So the move that I saw, and I kind of wonder if Magnus missed this too, is that I can play pawn to d4 here, because after pawn takes, king takes, you'll see that black cannot create the grip and guard this pawn on b4. The problem is black will lose both these juicers, not just one, but both. Whereas if we go back here, and I take, he goes c5, look at how the pawns clamp d4. But then if I go here, he goes over, and the king supports all the pawns, and the pawns support each other. So black might be able to draw this. This might be winning as well. I don't know. It's hard to judge. But if I play pawn to d4, threatening to take and takes, you'll see that, first of all, there's no pawn push because I capture. And then after I capture, there's no way to get the pawn here and support, because I'm just going to capture. Like king here, I just take. And he can't push because I take, and if he comes up, I just take the pawn. And I have way too many passed pawns on the queen side. So this is the all-star move, is pawn to d4 here, because I'm going to win a5 and b4. So Magnus goes c5, so I take. He goes king e7. I take the pawn e5. Again, I can take on a5, but then we reach that endgame that we were talking about before. So I take on e5. Again, I keep the idea of bishop c7 to eat this one. And if he goes bishop g4, I go back. And now black can try to attack the base and just gobble all the pawns. But I can very simply bring the king back to support the pawn and just take. And if black can't attack the base of the pawn chain on c2, this pawn right here, then I'm gonna end up winning this endgame pretty smoothly. So here he goes king d7 to try to stop bishop c7 to capture. So I go, whoops. So I go king f4 or bishop f6 first. Important move because now the king can never come up, because if he leaves one of these squares, I come around and I eat the pawn on a5 again. And so there are no good king squares. So he goes bishop b7. Now I go king f4. And I think Magnus played bishop c6 and resigned here, and he resigned in lieu of the fact that I can go in lieu of the fact that I go king to e5. There's no c4 push here because I don't capture this way. I capture this way, and my king still guards the pawn, and then I can reroute the bishop around to win a5 and b4 again. Or even another idea is I can just go here, 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 and play c3. And after takes, I just take, and I just capture the pawn at a5. You guys, in terms of people watching this, if this was going to affect the match specifically, if I was talking about things that matter, I would not be doing this commentary. I mean, there's certain things that I'm not going to talk about. So you guys, when you think that like I don't know what I'm doing or like I'm giving everything away, I'm giving you guys a lot of the insights, but I'm not giving anything that's top secret away. Okay. Board was lagging. Yeah, the board was a touch sus, but anyway, that's fine. So after bishop b7, king f4, bishop c6, Magnus resigned, and I think he resigned in lieu of the following idea. So I go king e5. There's no pawn to c4, so there's also no king moves. If you move the king, I go here and I hit the bishop and the pawn and I bring my king around. And so if he keeps waiting, the way that I win here is I go 1 and then I go 2. So now I hit the pawn on c5, still he pushes, I capture. And now if he brings the king up, the way that I win here is now I go the other way. I go towards this pawn, I'm going to capture, and then I'm going to make a queen on the h8 square with my other pawn. So this would have been the proper technique to finish off the game correctly. So yeah, so Magnus resigned here as soon as he played bishop c6 in this position, and so I got this victory in the third game. So so the match score was 1.5 as we went into the fourth game of the match yesterday. So let's take a look at this game. Let's flip the board. So in this game I was black, so it went d4, knight f6, knight f3. I played pawn to d5, bishop f4. Another opening Magnus has played a lot is the London system. And this opening used to be fairly dubious. It wasn't played much. It was considered sort of an amateur sort of line to play. But Magnus has played it a lot. Kamsky also has played it a lot, and Magnus specifically has played it many games against Ding Liren in this grand final. So I played pawn to c5 here, e3, queen b6, following my man Ding by bringing the queen out very early. In this game, Magnus played knight c3. Before he played pawn takes pawn, but after queen b2, knight d2, knight c6, I think Magnus and Ding had a very long game in this line. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think there was they had a couple of games in this. So Magnus plays knight c3. I played bishop to d7. Ideas play for fast development, cut off knight a4, try to grab pawns, just fast development on the queen side. So now Magnus goes rook b1 to guard the pawn. So I play pawn to e6. Now here he goes pawn to a3. I go bring my knight out to c6. Again, very logical idea. Just very simple development. Maybe rook c8, maybe put pressure on the pawn on d4 or the pawn on c2 as well. 24-hour stream when? That'll be coming up, you guys. It'll probably be after, it'll be in September sometime. Of course, I have a couple more days of this event, and then as soon as this is over, PogChamps will be starting immediately. So I probably won't be able to do the 24-hour stream until after PogChamps, but again, I'm not sure. At any rate, thank you so much to everybody. Thanks for all the follows. Crossing 500,000 yesterday. It's just been amazing, and just looking forward to everything, honestly. Just it's been great. All right, you guys. So after knight c6, Magnus plays bishop e2. I played knight to h5. Again, trying to get rid of this bishop that covers a lot of nice squares on the diagonal. Magnus goes bishop to e5. So now I take. Takes with the bishop. I take. Takes with the queen. We trade queens. And at this point, after knight f4, I was very, very pleased. I felt the position was very balanced. It should be pretty equal. I've got a great knight. My bishops are looking good. Everything here should be nice. So all right, you guys. So after knight f4, bishop f1 is played. I go bishop to d6 here. h4 is played. I play pawn to h5 again. Try to solidify this this king side here. Get my bishop on ideal squares. Bring the rook to the center. Play knight g6. London should not be hard to beat. Should not be dangerous, but it's hard to beat. Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say in terms of openings, you guys, is that normally any opening is probably okay in the sense that it's not losing. But when you have the white pieces, you really want to put pressure on your opponent. So even if you're not going to lose the game, psychologically, if you draw with white, where you get no opportunities, it feels bad. It feels bad, man. So g3, I go knight g6 here. Bishop to b5 is played by Magnus. Again, trying to exchange some bishops off the board. I play rook c8. He plays king d2. I play a6. We trade. Knight d1. White tries to reroute his knights like e3 and d3. Put them on some critical central squares where they cover a little bit of everything. So now I go f6. Magnus goes knight e3. I go knight to e7. c3 is played. And at this point, I think I should have been slightly better, but it's a little bit hard to figure out because also when you look at when I go back to yesterday and I look at the match situation, at this point in time, it was 1.5, 1.5. So it's very tricky. It's like it's an end game. It's 1.5, 1.5. You know you're a little bit better. Do you try to go for broke? Do you try to play it solid? It's a fine line. Because probably I should have played pawn to e5 here. And as the computer says, it's I think slightly better for black, but it's very hard because after king e2, playing something committal like e4, knight d2, and b5, you feel like you're doing okay. But this pawn on d5, it's a little bit weak. This knight on e3 is a great square. Very, very tricky. So not sure exactly, but it's complicated. So after c3, I play rook c6. He goes knight e1. And now here I definitely should have played e5. But again, I thought that I was in time with this knight b6, knight c4 idea, just to kind of simplify the position and keep the game going in the right direction. But unfortunately, after knight d3, knight b6, I overlooked this very strong move b4 that Magnus played. So I went rook to b8. Goes knight c5. I go king e7. Plays a4, which, by the way, this is a fantastic move by Magnus in a rapid game, showing extremely good understanding of the situation. Because during the game, I thought that I thought a4 was just a weird move. It gives up a pawn, but Magnus correctly judged that after we trade, and I take on a4, rook b3, b5, rook a1. That even though black is up one pawn, the knight is stuck on the rim because these pawns kind of guard each other and the knight has no way back into the game. So in return for being up one pawn, my knight is stuck on the edge of the board. So I go rook d8. Magnus plays knight c2. Play e5. He goes f4. Another move that I thought was pretty strong. Don't mind the engine evaluations. I think it's actually quite wrong. But let's see. Is it wrong? I mean, maybe king d7 is supposed to be good for a computer. Again, not a very human move, to put it mildly. I mean, I certainly would not be looking at this as a human. So I play king f7, rook f1. Again, white really doesn't want to trade. He wants to force me to decide which one I'm going to capture. So now I have to take, and I go f5. The idea is that on knight b4, trying to hit the rook and both of these pawns on d5 and a6, that I can swing my rook to e6 or g6, and there should be multiple layers in to the white position. So now I plays knight b4. I go rook g6 again, trying to keep the rook active. Laterally, I guard the pawn, but I also want to go rook g2, maybe knight b2, knight c4. And this is where it starts to get very tricky for white. Levy said trapping the knight on a4 was a mistaken exchange for a pawn. Well, I think the computer evaluation says that. I'm a little bit skeptical in general, but I don't know. So rook f2 is played here. I go rook a8. A logical move to guard the pawn so that I can now move my rook down and start to infiltrate the white camp. I also don't hang a pawn, because if knight takes pawn, I go knight takes c5, pawn takes knight. And I go rook d8, and the knight is pinned to the king, and I'm going to capture the knight and capture the pawn on c5. Those of you who are wondering, yes, this was from yesterday. I'm going over the games from yesterday and today. So Magnus goes rook b1. I play rook to g3. Again, trying to target this pawn and jump with the knight. If I can get knight takes and knight e4 with the fork, it will be cleanly winning. If white plays rook to c1, I can now jump with the knight to c4, a big jumper. And if knight d5, I also have knight d3 with the fork of the two rooks here. So here Magnus goes knight to d3, logical move. He cuts off the threats against the pawn, cuts off the square on b2, and he also has a jumbo outpost on e5. So now I go rook to e8. Hikaru, sorry to bother you. XQC just got hacked on Twitter, so just keep an eye on social media, bro. Be careful. I've actually never been hacked. I've been lucky. But yeah, if you guys start seeing me asking for Bitcoin, you know, it's you know that's not me. So knight to e5 played. I go king to g8. Rook to c1 is played, and now I'm able to go a5, which apparently is wrong or not. Let's see. Let's let the engine think for a second. I want to see what happens. Let's see. And you guys, yeah, I do have two-factor, of course. So yeah. Okay, so here I play a5. The idea is kind of to start pushing ahead on the queen side here. He goes rook e2. I play b4. We trade. Again, the idea that I want is I want to go knight to c3 and knight to e4, hit the rook, and bring the knight to the center of the board. And now Magnus, very correctly, and this is one of Magnus's strongest traits, is that he understands when the danger is coming and when it's time to just shut it down. And here he understood that the right moment was now to play rook e3, and we play a repetition, and the game ends in a draw, because I can't really afford to trade, because even though I'm up one pawn here, his pawn on c5 is very strong, and he can bring his king close and bring the rook close and win this pawn on b4. So yeah, so this is completely winning for white. Maybe not winning even, but I mean, I was very worried during the game about what would happen. So yeah, so this fourth game ended in a draw, and we'll move on to the blitz games that I played. So let's move on to the first blitz game. What I was gonna say is that, so if we look at this match, there are certain trends that occur within matches, especially when you're talking about rapid games or blitz games specifically. So when you're looking at like the trends of what's going on, the first game of this match I lost in a very bad fashion, got into bad positions, and I lost. Magnus played better than me. Third game I came all the way back. I won this very nice bishop's end game, and then in this fourth game I defended pretty well, and the game ended in a draw. So I would say that the trend was certainly in my favor going into these blitz games, but again, in blitz anything can happen. And one thing that I was very happy about is that in between these breaks I had a chance to take a look at the previous game that I had played. I think we're both doing that, by the way, is that when there are breaks in between games, or whether it's the rapid games or the blitz games, what we do is we have 10 to 15 minutes break, and we probably go to our other computer and take a look, or in my case, obviously I just turn my other monitor back on and I open ChessBase and take a look at the game. So sort of you take a look and you just go from there, and you try to have one little idea. And in blitz especially, the main thing you want to do is move quickly and try to get ahead on the clock. Okay, so I play e4. Magnus plays e5, knight f3, knight 6, bishop b5, knight f6, d3. Same opening, a Berliner defense. We trade. I go knight d2, castles. I play queen e2 again. Magnus goes rook e8. I play knight c4, knight d7, bishop d2. The idea behind me playing bishop d2, again, much of the same. h4, maybe castle. At the same time, I also stopped this idea with b5 and a5 and the quick flinging of the pawns. So b5 is played by Magnus. I go knight to e3 again. Very similar position to the previous game. Knight f8, play h4, and here Magnus makes a critical blunder. He plays knight to e6. Very natural looking move. If you aren't paying 100% attention, you just think, okay, I can just do this, it's no different. There is a big difference here, which is that unlike in the previous game with the white pieces, after knight takes pawn, if black goes knight d4, I can go queen to h5. And in the previous game, my pawn was on h5 already, so when there was a knight d4, I had no access because the pawn was in the way of my queen. But in this case, I can go queen h5, and now if black goes g6, I play knight takes pawn, and laterally, once he takes my knight, I take his bishop on the c5. So here Magnus goes a5. Again, trying to just play quick moves and get some development. I go queen h5. Magnus plays g6. I go queen f3. Double attack on the pawn. I also still am attacking the pawn on c6. Plays pawn to f6. I take on c6. Queen d7. And here I burned quite a bit of time trying to figure out what the best move was. I think there are many good moves, but I thought just taking a bishop c3, I'm at the very least going to win all the kingside pawns, and surely that's got to be good for me. Apparently the computer likes knight g4 more. I don't really, after queen f6. Oh my gosh, bishop. Oh, I have knight e5. Oh my gosh. I am so bad at chess. I am so bad at chess. So basically in the game, there's actually no difference. After takes, I should have gone knight g4 again, threatening checkmate because of the box here on the king, no squares at all. And after bishop f8, I have knight e5. Oh my gosh. Oh, that is so bad. Because the point is after knight e5, I hit the queen, but I also am going to get a check. So the queen can't go here because I take. And if the queen goes here, I go check, and I hit the king. He moves over, I take. And if queen e5, I just go bishop c3, and I skewer the... I pin the queen and the king, and it's just game over. That's just so bad. Oh my gosh, how did I miss that? That's very disappointing. Anyway, I played bishop c3. Much of the same idea, just play like queen h8, queen h7. He goes rook f8. I check. Yeah, I saw knight g4. I just didn't see knight e5, you guys. So he goes rook f8. I check. I take. He goes here. I take here. And now I play pawn to d4. Very nice move. The point is that if the bishop moves back, I go d5, forking the queen and the king. If he takes with the bishop, I take and takes. I go check. Again, more geometry. Pretty classic. Right triangle. I collect the knight on d4. And if he takes with the knight here on d4, I think it's the same thing. I just go queen g7, same thing. Classic right triangle, game over. So after I play d4, Magnus goes pawn to b4. In a 15-minute game, I probably would see knight e5. Yeah, probably. So I take, he resigns here. Magnus resigned in view of the fact that after pawn takes bishop, I castle the king to e7. I go knight d5 check. King has no squares on this side, so he has to go here, and then I fossilize the queen with knight to b4, creating the check on the king, and then I'm just going to take the queen on c6, or if it gets in the way. So this is just completely winning. And so Magnus resigns here after I castle my king here, and I took the lead 1-0 in the blitz portion. So let's move on to the second blitz game, where I had the black pieces. Let's flip the board. So this was the second blitz game, e4 c5. Magnus plays the English opening. We of course have played this many other games. He goes b3. I'm reading chat, you guys. I'm reading chat, but we all know what's happening in the world. So I go bishop e6, knight c3, queen d7, and now Magnus plays this move pawn to d4. I don't know what's with the bar. The bar is off. Let me why is the bar so bad? Okay, let's go to 20. Yeah, the bar is insane. So d4, so I play pawn takes pawn, knight to b5. Play pawn to d3 again, trying to give back the pawn to create a weak white pawn. So material goes from up one pawn to e. What's wrong with the bar? Yeah, something's wrong with the bar. I mean the bar is kind of losing its mind. Anyway, okay, so anyway, after d3, Magnus ignores it. He plays bishop to b2. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, you guys. Apologies for the bar. The bar is drunk. Yes, the bar is drunk. Good one. So I go f6 here. Magnus plays knight to d4. I go knight takes, bishop d5. What's wrong with the bar? I'm sorry, you guys. Yeah, I'm a little confused. So okay, so I go bishop d5. Magnus plays bishop takes, queen d3. Go pawn to c5, and now the position kind of stabilizes here, because white has to move a knight or the queen. But either way, I get to trade queens, and I was actually very happy. I changed it to 20, you guys. But I felt very good because at this point I knew queens were going to come off the board. But Magnus does find this knight f5 move, and white is definitely better. He's got a knight on this outpost, and also if I ever try to kick the knight, I then create problems on this diagonal for my rook and my bishop. So I go king to e6. He plays pawn to e4. I go rook c8 again, trying to open up this line with c4 so I can activate the bishop maybe, but also bring the knight or bring the rook down to c2 or the knight to c4. So now here he goes rook c1. So I play pawn to c4, trying again to open this up. He goes rook fd1, played g6, and now Magnus finds a very nice move, knight to d4, king f7, and now knight b5. Excellent idea. It brings the knight around, hits the pawn on a7, and he can also bring the knight to d6 potentially as well. So it's very, very good for white. So now here I go bishop e7, which is actually the critical mistake. What I should have done was I should have played bishop to c5, and the reason that this is much better is because after knight a7, rook a8, knight b5, I can now take the pawn on a2. And you'll see that in this case, or not, let's go back. Apparently I'm supposed to go rook c d8, and I'm just worse. I don't know what's with the bar or the computer. It seems to be acting very, very weird for me. So after knight b5, I go bishop e7. He takes. I go here. And the problem with this is that when I take on a2, now white has bishop d4, and my bishop can't trade, and so my knight's under attack, and then the pawn on c4 falls if I move the knight. So I go knight to c8. Thank you to the Mechaniac for the 22 months. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. He plays rook c4, rook d8. So white's up a pawn here, but it's a queenless endgame. We only have rooks on the board. There's a weak pawn on b3, so potentially there are chances here. So he goes rook c7. I play pawn to b6, and now he goes knight to c3. Big mistake, by the way. What Magnus should have played here was he should have gone king to g2. And after king g2, the reason that this is probably lost is white can just move the rook, and not a whole lot is happening here. So as you guys can see from the bar, this is just winning. And this one is a legit evaluation. So Magnus plays knight c3, which is a big mistake, because now after rook c2, he creates sort of the self pin, and now he has to play knight d5, and king g2, king e8, knight d5. Now the problem is that even though white's up a pawn, there's only one set of rooks on the board, and the drawing possibilities with less rooks on the board become much more pronounced. So here I go f5, f3, play bishop c5, he trades, and here I think is probably what I would say was the critical mistake by Magnus in the second blitz game. Now obviously both players, we were both low on time, so it's hard to be super critical, but I felt that at this point, if Magnus had traded the pawns with pawn takes and played like knight to e3, I suspect that he would have been much better, and had very good winning chances, because once he plays rook c1, we trade, and I go knight d6. Now everything starts to swing a little bit out of control, and it becomes very hard, technically speaking, to convert this. So he takes. I take here, go king f6. He goes king f3. Not rook takes h7, by the way, because even though that's a free pawn, I can now play knight to g5. And the problem is, no matter where white moves the rook, if he goes like h6, I can play rook to d2, king f1, and now I have knight f3. And it actually ends up being a draw because my knight and rook hold the critical squares, and white's king is so bad on the back rank. There's just really there are no access points for the white king here. Respect for doing this instead of resting. How much exactly do I have to pay for you to move to the lead chess? I'm thinking of a Kickstarter. Very funny, my man. Very, very funny. So king f3 is played here. I play knight to d2, king e4. I take this pawn, rook h7, and now after knight d4, this position becomes what we would call a technical draw, because now it's rook knight and pawn versus rook knight 2 pawns. And one of the general rules in endgames is that when you have pawns on the same side of the board, generally it's very drawish, or they're very, very drawish tendencies. So he goes rook a7, rook d6, of course. I guard laterally against this check on a6, and against any of these ideas with rook a6. So he plays rook to a8. I go knight to f5. He goes rook to f8. Theoretical or technical, same thing. Technical draw means, I just mean with the correct play, it's a draw. So I go here, rook a8. We play a lot of quick moves here. Pretty standard stuff, I thought. Somewhere around here, it should have been a pretty clean draw, but I started to misplay it. So I went here. It's still a draw. Goes rook a4, and here I blundered. I should have gone knight h4. Because now if king g1, I can go knight f3, and once the rooks come off, we reach a 2 versus 1, which is a clear draw. And if he goes to the e file, I can just start checking him away. So this would have been the best way to make the draw, but I went rook b6 again. Logical idea to play rook b2. He goes knight f3. I check. He goes king g1. I play knight e3. Big mistake, by the way. What I should have done here, I think, was just make a check. King g2, and now I go knight to e3. King f2, knight d1, and now the game ends in a draw. Because white can never go to any of these back 3 squares, because whichever one he goes to, I create the fossil. I hit the king with my rook, basically, and he can't go here because it's the same fork. And if he goes here, I just check again. So this would have been a draw on the spot. This was a very big mistake by me missing this. I played knight e3, and now after rook e4, I play check. I go knight here, but the difference is that in this case, when I check and the king comes back, there's the same idea as rook b1. It's not quite the same, I think, because white can go rook to e1. I mean, maybe still I go knight c3 and it's a draw, but it's tricky. So I should have done this nonetheless, but I played rook b3, blundering this rook e6 move because I thought I could go king f5. But if I go king f5, he plays knight d4, which protects the rook but also creates a fork at the same time. So it's kind of a triple function move. So I played king h5. He goes knight to e5. I play knight to e3 again, trying to bring my knight back, trying to stop checkmate too, because if I play like a move like rook b1, he goes check, knight guards the pawn, king h4, and rook h6, and this is just checkmate because knight guards the pawn, king's in check, and I can't go up. So this is just winning for white. So I go knight e3 to stop g4. Magnus plays h3, and now here I make the critical mistake. I go rook to b2. What I should have done was I should have played g4 here, and the reason I should have done this is because after pawn to h4, I can just go knight to f5, and it's just an easy draw. I am so bad at chess. That is terrible. That is truly terrible. That is truly terrible. So I played rook b2, rook e8 played. Chad, if people are saying, someone says Rustam and Jan said my opening preparation seemed to be worse than Magnus's. Jan has always been biased against me, so I mean I have nothing to say to that. That's just ridiculous. Considering that the first two matches, I mean I out-prepared Magnus in his d4 opening. Like that's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. And I mean I don't care if you guys want to clip it, you can clip it, but that's literally the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So he plays rook e8, which apparently is a blunder, by the way, because here he should have gone rook to e7, and this is winning here because there's still the mate threat. And after king h6, knight f7, king g6, white has this amazing move, knight to h8 check here, and white hits the king but also collects the knight on e3. So so it's just winning. And or sorry, I meant Jan. No, it's Jan though. It's Jan. Jan. No, it's Jan. It's Jan, but it's with a J, you guys. It's Jan. No, we're not talking about Jan Nepomniachtchi. We're talking about Jan Gustafsson. Different dude, my man. Different dude. Anyway, okay, so rook to e8 was played. I go king h6 here, and now he plays pawn to g4. The reason this is a draw is because now if white checks, I go here. And you don't want to take the knights. If you trade the knights, like if you trade the knights e3 for f7, then basically it's just you know it's just a classic 2 versus 1 draw. And after pawn and if you take on g5 here with the knight, I go rook g2 check, knight holds the rook, king goes over, and I take this pawn. Now this is also a pretty clean draw as well. What happened? What did we get an F? What happened? Did I miss something? No, I don't see anything. Yeah. So anyway, this would have been a draw here. So instead, Magnus goes g4, so I check. I go rook g3. If white goes king h2 here, I can just check, hold the rook, create the check. He goes back, and I just go knight e3 again and ask him what he's doing. So he plays rook h8. I go here, rook h5. I go king to f6. Again, attacking the knight and holding the pawn on g5. He goes knight d3. Now, white can play like a knight d7 move, but after king g6, knight f8, there are many different ways to draw, but the easiest is just king f6, knight h7, king g6, and when white takes the pawn on g5, I take on g4, he takes, and I go rook g4. And the rook is under attack, and the knight's under attack, and so this turns into rook versus rook, and the game would end in a draw like this. So he goes knight d3, which allows knight takes g4, and now it peters out into a draw because laterally I hit the knight. So if he takes, I take his knight. Goes knight c5, and now the one last thing is not to blunder this fork here of the king and the rook and just play knight f2. King h2, rook takes h3. Just simplify, get everything off the board, and just end the game with knight takes knight, and the game ends in a draw. So So game ends in a draw like this, and I win the match. 3.5, 2.5. Where can we see the games tomorrow? The games tomorrow will be on my channel as always at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. So you will be able to follow. Levy and Anna will be doing commentary like they've been doing every single day. So it will be here on my channel at 10 a.m. Eastern, which I believe is 4 p.m. Central European Standard Time, or 3 p.m. General mean. Sorry, no, 3 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, not General. Sorry, Greenwich Mean Time. Apologies, you guys. Greenwich Mean Time. So 4 p.m. Central European Time, 3 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. General. Yeah, exactly, you guys. So anyway, so I won this match. I took the 2-1 lead. DJ Electra says that's too early for West Coasters. Can you move it back? I'm sorry, you guys. I do not own Chess 24, so I cannot have them move matches. I mean, you know, maybe if I had some football match that I needed to desperately watch, they would oblige, you know, perhaps. But I don't have a football match that I desperately need to watch, so they're not going to move it for me. All right, so let's move on to let's move on to the match today. Okay, so let's move on to the match today. So I started with the black pieces today. So d4 was played. I played pawn to e5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, d5. Same opening, by the way. Looking very similar. b3 played again by Magnus. So now here I played bishop to e6, bishop b2. I play pawn to f6, knight c3 played. Knight c3 played, so here I go queen to d7. Queen to c1 is played. So the first original kind of idea by Magnus here, trying to change it up a little bit. There are many moves: queen c2, queen c1. d4 is also a move as well. Many different moves that can be played here. So he goes queen c1. Now here I played knight d4, which is objectively a bad move. Idea was kind of just to simplify and open up the position. He trades. I take, goes knight e4. And so now I castled. He plays pawn to a4. Very nice move, by the way. Maybe I can take. Wow. Okay, so computer says I can maybe grab and play knight a4. I mean, this is very dank. This is not human at all. Maybe a computer says you can play like this, but it's very hard to believe. So a4, I play d3 again. Similar idea, just create a weakness. Try to get rid of this pawn that's under attack so that I can follow up with like knight d5 and bishop h3. So he goes a5, knight d5, knight c5. We trade. And now here I go king b8. Magnus plays bishop d4, which I think in retrospect is maybe not the best move. I was quite concerned that white could play e4 here. And after knight e7, something like f4 or e5. But I think f4 was my main concern. Just e5 is coming, f5 is coming. These diagonals are open. There's just so much pressure potentially with rook c1 that I was quite concerned by this. So I was very pleased to see Magnus go bishop d4. Because now I play b6. And even though the position looks very bad optically in the sense that white has this nice bishop and this nice bishop, the knight holds the center and he does have these weaknesses. So if I can stabilize by like doubling the rooks, then I should be doing pretty well. So I go rook c8. He takes, I go rook c7. I was very pleased to find this, by the way, because the idea behind rook c7 and rook c8, just double the rooks, create the solid base so that I can go bishop h3. Because, for example, if I try bishop h3 here, white trades, and then there's queen a7 with checkmate hitting the king here. So when I saw rook c7, I was very happy, because now the idea is to go bishop h3, because my rook holds this and the knight holds this, and I can also double on the c file, so everything is looking very, very good. Levy lost his mind when I found that move, when I found rook c8, you mean? But it's... I don't even know... Oh, it is the best move. Wow. Okay. I mean, I just trying to find some logical ideas that sort of fit in with the plan. So I go rook c7, he goes rook e1, I go bishop h3. He takes on b6, and actually this was a big blunder too, because at this point, I actually thought I was out of danger here. I thought that I could just play like bishop g4, or not bishop g4, sorry. I thought I could go bishop h3, and the line that I calculated was bishop h3, rook e7, knight e7, bishop b6. And at first I was very concerned because I thought there was capture. I can't recapture here because of checkmate. But I was very happy that at the board I realized if he does this, I just go rook to b7. And if white takes on b7, I just take back with the queen. And I create the checkmate idea here. And as you see in this position, it's black's just winning. I'm up on rook and I'm doing fine. The problem is when I played this line, I missed that he could actually invert the order and play it the other way with bishop b6 first, because now if I take with the knight, he goes rook e7. I have to keep the queen on this line to protect the bishop, and disaster strikes after queen f5 because now he just takes. I take the rook, and now queen a7, and you see I can't keep the knight intact because this bishop holds both squares, and it's just checkmate in a couple of moves. So I miscalculated this order. I saw the other order. I missed the inversion of these moves, and I probably should have lost the game here. But after thinking for quite a while, I just decided, you know what, it's bad, but maybe I can still try to play. And one other thing I would say is if I take this bishop here as well, by the way, you guys, this loses because now white can play. I thought bishop b5. Sorry, yeah, rook e7. Yeah, white goes rook e7, and it's just winning because now I can't take with the knight because there's queen e8. If I take with the queen, I lose, and just the whole house collapses. Everything's under attack. So I missed this inverted order with bishop b6 first, and so I had to take. He plays rook e7, and now I take on d2. He plays bishop h3. Of course not. Rook takes rook, because if rook takes rook, I can just take this rook. And bishop f1, queen f1 is checkmate again. Bishop and queen guard each other and cover the critical squares. So he goes bishop h3. So I play rook to d8. And at this point, by the way, you guys, I knew that this was losing, but you know, it's still even material. And even with kind of an open king, there still is some protection. But I would say I was shocked that Magnus misplayed this, because at this point, White, this is a classic Magnus position. White has a very safe king. He can put the bishop on g2 or f1. 3 pawns around the king. Very, very safe king. Very, very safe king position here, so it should be winning. But Magnus played queen a6, which I think kind of is a start of making some mistakes. Now I trade, and after queen d1, bishop f1, rook d7, it gets a little bit tricky. It's still winning for white, but the bishop is now not an active piece because it's pinned by the queen on d1. So white ends up losing one of his attackers here because the bishop can never move. So he goes rook e8. I go rook to d8. And now he plays rook to e3. I play pawn to h5. Again, trying to create something over here. White's bishop is still tied down. So as long as you can't activate this bishop and use the third piece to try and attack, then I think there are always chances to hold. So Magnus plays h4, and now I play pawn to g5. In retrospect, I suspect that h4 was a mistake, not in so much as it's not winning still, but that after h4 g5, there are always ideas. There always are ideas to kind of just try and rip open the king side, and it doesn't become as trivial or as clear cut as it should be normally. So we trade the pawns. He goes rook to e7. I play back, play a couple of repeating moves, and now Magnus goes queen b5. Again, guarding the rook. If I trade, he takes back, and now I lose the pawn in h5. So he plays queen b5. He's supposed to play. Yeah, I heard something about a king h2. Oh, is it supposed to be king h2 here? Which king h2 is it, you guys? Is it supposed to be king h2 here, or is it a different position? When I push the pawn. Oh, king h2 here? But then I take bishop g2, I take, aha, yeah, because if I go queen d7, there's this rook d3. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I didn't actually, that makes a lot of sense. Just bring the third attacker into the game. Because in the game, basically, after queen b5, h4, white is still much better, but the problem is now, again, this bishop can never come into the game, so white's attacking with 2 pieces, and if I can get one more pawn off the board, the draw becomes a very, very realistic possibility. So he plays for queen e5, I go king c8, he plays rook e6. Now Magnus could have tried to trade the rooks, but after rook d8, queen d8, this apparently is winning for white, but why? No, it's not. Okay, it's still better for white, but you end up in an endgame with a queen and bishop against a queen and a knight, so it's not clear cut at all in terms of what is going on at this point, and yeah, it's just very, very tricky. Oh, he said he should have played h3 instead of h4. Yeah, I think h3 was better than h4. That makes a lot of sense objectively, because also the problem is now like pieces come off the board. Did I miss a raid? Oh, did I miss a raid or not? I don't see it. Oh, whoa, thank you to Levy, thank you to Gotham Chest for the raid with 1,704 people. Thank you so much to Gotham Chest. Thank you, Levy. I think the settings are a little bit off at the moment for raids. I didn't even see it pop on the screen. Thank you so much, Levy. Hope you had a good stream. Hope all is well. Big shout out to Mr. Levy Rosman, Gotham Chest, doing commentary every day on this Magnus Carlsen Grand Final with Anna Rudolph on his channel, her channel, my channel, everyone's channel. All right, you guys. So this is still good for white, but tricky to play. So he goes rook e6. I take. Check, I go king b7. He checks, I go king e8. Now he takes. Now I was very pleased to find knight to d5 here, because now there are some issues potentially with me jumping with the knight to f4, creating some checks or some mating ideas as well. And now he takes. Apparently queen g2 is supposed to be good, but again, very, very hard to play. Why is it so good? Queen g5. Oh my gosh, because knight f4 is check. Oh my gosh. Wow, computers are too good. So apparently queen g2 is supposed to be good for what? Oh wow. Okay, well, this is computers for you guys. Computers. So he goes queen g5. I play knight f4, which I think Magnus missed, because after knight f4, the problem is I have this fork, but also if white just tries to ignore it with, like, I don't know, like what's a way to ignore this? Maybe like a queen move, like queen g7. I actually go queen takes f1, and after king f1, I have rook d1, which is checkmate, because the king is under attack, but he can't go up to either of these two squares because the knight holds both g2 and e2. So I was very pleased to find this. And then he takes. I go check. He goes king h2. Now I take, and queen f3. Important move here. Stops the checkmate. So after check here, there's no mate on h1, and if I try to mate here, he has this move with the fossilization of my king, and then he collects the rook on h8 on the next move. So after queen f3, I play king b8. He goes rook queen f4. I go here. Makes a repetition. Plays rook h6, of course, to stop rook h8 mate. But now I just check. And after queen g1, white has nothing better than to make the draw, because now queen h2 is the threat. If you go back, I repeat, of course, with the check, and it's just winning. So he plays check. He plays a bunch of checks just to gain a little bit of time on the clock, but then at the end of the day, after all these checks, there's nothing better here. Nothing better here than making a draw. So he just plays check, and the game ends in a draw. So after 2 games, we were all square at 1. So now I move on to the 3rd game of the day. Wait, is this the 3rd game? Wait, no, sorry, this is the 3rd game. This is the 3rd game. Okay, so e4, e5, knight f3, knight. Whoops. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, castles, knight f6, d3. All pretty standard stuff. I'm not going to go over it in depth. Magnus and I have had this position. We had this in the I think we had this in the final blitz game of, or no, not final blitz game. We had this in the rapid game. I think it was our 2nd match of the Lindorus Abbey semifinal. We played this exact same position, so we trade. And now here I played a4, which I believe is a mistake. It's not the best move, because after bishop c2, the problem is that white lines up this battery. He's got like knight h4 coming, queen d3 coming, and there's a lot of stuff going on. Am I free to answer why I didn't go into the Sicilian in game 4? Or is that too strategically timed? In game 4, I was white, and Magnus did not play the Sicilian defense, so might be a little bit confused. So I played a3. He takes. I go bishop g4. Not the best move. I think here bishop f5 is a better try, although it's already probably kind of a little bit iffy for black. You can see the valuation spiking. Just in general, a4 is not the best move. So I went bishop g4, goes to a4, queen d7 again, trying to line up ideas, maybe attack this pawn, maybe bring the bishop back. And now Magnus plays bishop a3, so I go rook e8. Again, unwinding from this pin here. So again, if queen d3 to line up the battery, I can go bishop f5 or maybe knight g6. So he goes bishop e7, I take, he goes queen d3. And now, of course, I have to close the diagonal down, so there's no checkmate with g6. He goes knight h4, I play queen to b4. And after knight g6, apparently this is just bad for black, although at the time I wasn't 100% sure what was going on, because after king f8, knight d5, apparently queen f2 is a losing move here because the tactics don't work out. What I should have played in this game was actually I should have gone rook takes pawn. Very hard move to play, by the way, because now if white plays rook takes rook, I can take this one, and I hit the king, and I'm going to collect the rook. And if he trades the queens after bishop d4, rook e5, bishop e5, black is down one pawn, but white has two sets of double pawns, these two and these two. And so with two sets of double pawns and black having two bishops, there should be very good drawing chances. So rook e5 apparently would have been better, although it still is probably bad. After knight b6, I can play queen d3, trade takes, bishop b5, and again, tough position to judge. With absolute correct play, this probably is a draw because white still has two sets of double pawns. At the same time, I don't know how easy it is to draw this, because it looks pretty unpleasant. Now a computer would draw this against a human very easily. In practice, with two humans playing, I still think this is very likely to be a win for white, but I still should have done this because unfortunately the game after queen f2, king h2, rook d8, I miscalculated this whole line with rook f1. Basically what I missed is on rook f1, I thought I could play bishop to f5 here. The idea being if white takes the queen, I take the queen. He can't take the bishop because he loses the rook, so he has to capture this bishop. But then I just play bishop takes bishop, rook takes bishop, pawn takes pawn, and white is better here, but they're very, very good drawing chances, because white has two sets of double pawns and black has one set, but this pawn is weak, and if he loses this one, he only has double pawns on the board. Magnus said this line was drawing, he had nothing. Okay, I mean bishop f5 doesn't draw though, because after bishop f5 the problem is that white has this check. And when I block with the queen, there's this all-star move, queen to c1, which is just crazy because the problem is that if I take the bishop, he takes the pawn, and I can't go this way, so I have to go here, and then there's knight f6, and this is just a clean checkmate for white. And if I try to play like rook takes knight after after queen takes pawn, I can't go this way because then he checks, and if I go king e7, there's just bishop takes, and my king doesn't get out of the center of the board in time. Oh, they mean not taking on f2. Yeah, I mean, it's probably a draw with correct play, but very hard to judge. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, basically I missed this queen a3, queen c1. That was the problem. So I played rook takes pawn. He plays rook takes queen. And now here I blunder with rook takes rook, which just loses. What I should have done is I should have just gone for it with this move. It's still losing, of course, but it's a better try because after queen a3, at least I can hope for some kind of miracle with like pawn, I mean, I guess like rook to d6, knight f4, rook e3. But after queen b4, I take, he just goes back, and white has a queen for a rook. My king is open, and it's just winning. So I played this move, but after rook takes f7, king e8, there's just a very simple clarification with queen takes rook. During the game, I only saw rook f8, and while I think this is still winning, after takes rook f1, king e7, there still are some tricks because I can run with the king. And their ideas like rook h5, it's still winning, I'm sure, but there are chances for some kind of mistake happening. So yeah, so he plays queen takes rook, I take, he goes here, and now at this point after king d8, rook e1, with the king being stuck on the back rank especially, it's just a clean win for white. I play a few more moves. But after rook h8, it's just over because the idea is rook h7. I can't move the bishop to the pin from this rook, and if I go up with the king, he just goes rook takes pawn, and again, too many threats. Bishop e4 coming, bishop e8 coming. I can't move my king because then I lose the bishop. So I resigned after rook to h8. So unfortunately, I lost this third game, which meant that the match score was 2-1, and so. Did I skip the second game by accident, you guys? Did I skip the second white game? Or the first white game? I think I did, didn't I? Okay, so sorry about that. Yeah, let's go to the second game. Okay, sorry, you guys. All right, well, this wasn't much of a game, luckily, so so we're not missing much. Okay, so in the second game, Magnus decided to deviate. Instead of playing bishop to c5, he played pawn to d6. So I played c3. Do I think Magnus or a coach of his watched the stream? They might be watching, but the thing is, I'm not. I know what is top secret information and what isn't. So I played d4. I traded. Basically, the reason I did this in large part was just because I wasn't really expecting this, first of all, and secondly, the match score was even, so I felt like, you know, I got some information about what he was going to try to play and what his intentions were. So that's the main thing I would also say is when you're playing in a match, when you're playing in a match like this, you're looking for information of what your opponent is playing as well. So like the thing I would say is that you're trying to look for get information and info. So anyway, pretty standard. Yeah, I'm not gonna say what the score is because of course we still have more games to go through. But this is a best of 7. It's not a best of 1 or a best of 2. So anyway, very boring game. We just exchange the pieces. Pieces come off very cleanly, and we just make a very easy draw. Not much to say, just boring. If I wanted to get him, I should have pushed him in the second game when he was down for missing winning chance in the first game. Maybe. I mean, it's easy in retrospect to look back at it, but you could also make the argument in the third game if I had played the right moves, I probably don't lose that game. So you know, it's all kind of hindsight. And what I would say is that like it's easy afterwards to, once you know what's going to happen in the individual games, but at the time, you know, it's hard to judge. So, all right. If you prep lines that don't come up, do you use them in future games? Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So, okay, let's go to the fourth game then. So the fourth game as well was this Berlin defense. I play D3. Magnus again plays D6. I go C3. He goes here. I play D4. Now Magnus plays Bishop G7. Pretty original idea. Now here I castled. He castles. I play Rook E1. Probably not precise because after he takes and goes Bishop G4, already I think the position is objectively pretty balanced. Why not D5? I don't know if D5 is a good move or a bad move, but I will be looking at moves like that later on tonight. So please stop drawing these games. I'm sorry, you guys, that I've drawn some games. I apologize. Jake Adiwa says, watching so many Twitch ads today, that's dedication. Jake Adiwa, what I will say on that topic, and this will be the case going forward. I do have contractual obligations, so I have to run ads. So apologies for that, but I do contractually I have to run ads. So that's just how it's going to be going forward. All right, so Bishop G4 is played. I played Bishop takes knight, pawn takes knight, and now I play knight b to D2. And the point is that basically I bring the knights into the center of the board. Sort of protect the pawn, but I also want to capture with the knight. So he goes Rook E8. I play Queen to C2, pawn to C5. I take, plays D5. Very nice move, by the way. Magnus played this game very well, and at this point, I think I used maybe like 10 minutes here, and I was desperately looking for a way to just create something complicated. Like at this point in the match, when it's a must-win game, you don't care what you do. The only thing that matters is try and get something that's imbalanced. Like if you lose the game, you lose the game, but it doesn't matter. You just want to go for get something that is that's not clear cut. So so I play H3. He trades, takes. I go knight to H2 again, just trying to create an imbalance, sort of an imbalanced pawn structure. Not that it really matters much, but it's still something. So he plays Queen D3. Yeah, no message. Okay, let's go back. So Queen D3. I play Queen to A4. Magnus plays A6, which I think is okay. The commentators didn't like Knight H2 at all. Yeah, but I mean, the thing here that I was trying to do is I was just trying to get something messy, something unclear, anything messy. I know I leaked Twitter, you guys, but there's no new message. So what can I say? Okay, so I played Knight H2 again, just trying to create a mess. Like, I know I'm worse here, but it's not about the objective evaluation of the position. When you're kind of oh, XUC's Twitter hacks no messages, right? But when you're in a game where where it's like a must win, you don't care if you lose the game. You don't care if what you play is bad objectively. You just try to create something that's not stable and a flat where it's equal and drawish. That's what you have to do. It's kind of like trying to play a little bit of hope chess, but like I knew I was worse here, but you really don't care, because if you lose the game, who cares? It doesn't matter because there's only one result that matters. Hikaru, please focus tomorrow. I'm sorry, MozDNX. I'm so sorry, dude. Like, I mean, I'm trying to play good chess. Apologies if you think that I'm like not taking this match seriously. Like, Jesus Christ, man. Okay, A6, I go Rook D1, Queen B5, I go Queen to C2 here. Magnus plays Rook D8, I play Bishop to E3. And now Magnus plays Knight D5, and I go Bishop G5. At this point, it's really, really bad, but I was kind of a touch optimistic here. Because I've had this feeling that even though I know black should be much better, there are chances for a little bit of tricks, like maybe a Knight G4 or Knight H6, something kind of random that could happen. So he plays F6, I go Bishop D2. Hikaru, staying up till 4 a.m. to watch you. Really enjoying your chess. Good luck tomorrow. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So I go A4 here. queen c6, bishop d2. Again, just desperately trying to create something on the queen side. Only idea here is to create a majority. So he goes, I'm not very into this tournament, just watching a Gadmator's videos. Can you explain the phenomenon of the Berlin defense? The main thing that I would say about the Berlin defense is a very solid opening. It's been one of the most solid openings for the last 20 years. So that's one of those things that I would say, it's what you play when you want to be solid. So I play rook b1 again. Only hope here is to somehow create some pawn majority or a pass pawn and just hope that somehow there's some trick and something gets messy. So he plays f4. I go queen c4. I back to it 4-1 odds. Please win. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So it goes king h8, bishop to e1. The other thing that I was going to say as well in terms of the openings is that when you're playing in a match strategy is much different. Because in a match, your strategy, you want to be very solid. It's not, you know, it's not the same thing like in an individual blitz game like that I play online. You know, I'll play Berlin, I'll play other things, but you kind of are just like, you're having fun. But when you're playing in a match, very oftentimes you want to be stable and solid with the black pieces. Vladimir Kramnik, the Berlin Berry. Yeah, I mean, basically what I would say is Kramnik, you can say either he's a genius for finding the best defense for black, or you can say that he's the worst person ever for ruining chess. There really are no two ways about it. That's kind of what I would say in regards to Kramnik. So here, Magnus plays e3. I play pawn to d4, b4. Again, just trying to open up the position and create something messy. And at this point, I was also moving very quickly to try and get up on the clock and hope that Magnus would make a mistake. But unfortunately, position is a little bit too clarified and too simple. So he takes, I take, and he goes knight to e3. Offers two ways and says there are no two ways about it. Well, I'm saying yes, you have to pick one of the two ways, and that's it. Knight e3, we trade. He takes, I go b5 again, desperately trying to create a pass pawn, but after takes, pawn to e2, now the position just becomes completely dry. So I play queen e2. Magnus takes, of course, creates a check on my king, so I cannot capture the rook. I go queen to f2. And now, to his credit, Magnus finds this very beautiful idea with rook e1. He could have taken the pawn on b5 and played on. I think this is probably still a draw long term after knight f3. But again, why do you even do this when there's this cute draw with rook e1? Because after rook takes e1, there's bishop d4, which pins the queen to the king, and now there's no choice besides playing check and just checking and making the draw. And so we just repeat moves, and the game ends in a draw. So Magnus won this match 2.5, 1.5. And so now it's 2-2. It's a best of 3. And we have 3 more matches to go potentially. So just have to keep playing good chess. Is the upcoming day kind of mentally the most important one? I think what I would say in general, and I alluded to this at the start of the stream as well, I think, which is important. You know, when your opponent generally plays better than you, which I felt like today for the most part, I mean, it happens. You're not always gonna play the best chess, and sometimes your opponent's gonna play better than you. And I wouldn't even say best chess. I guess the way I would say is that Magnus, he was a little bit sharper. He came with some good ideas, and I wasn't quite as sharp as Magnus was, and he played some very good moves, especially in the first game and also in the third game. So what I would say is you just move on. Yes, I will analyze the games and go back, but beyond that, it's already gone from my mind. I'm not even thinking about it whatsoever, and that's kind of the important thing with chess, especially, is that you don't dwell on it. It's like, you don't be like, OMG, I could have won today, OMG. I mean, that's not what you do. It's like, it's over, it's in the past, blank slate, doesn't matter. Tomorrow is a new day, and today didn't happen. So that's how it goes. OMG. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I would say. That's what I would say. Yeah, that's a problem. I've lost sleep over a game once. Yeah, I think when you're playing classical chess tournaments where it's one game a day, it's much harder to just move on after a bad game. But yeah, the main thing is that when you're in this situation, blank slate, it's gone, it's finished. I mean, you can't change the past. I mean, we're not like Doctor Strange or anything. I don't have my time machine. I can't, I don't have the stones, so I can't change time. So why should I be thinking about it? There's no point thinking about it. You just have to move on to tomorrow and to the next match, and just keep focusing. So we go again tomorrow. It's a best of 3. I'm gonna need either myself or Magnus. One of us has to win 2 out of the next 3 to win the best of 7. But it's gonna be a lot of fun.